A Silent Voice is a story about Shoyo and Shoko. There's a valuable moral lesson behind the chemistry between these two characters and how they feel about one another, and I'll share what I believe that moral is at the end of the video. Shoko, being deaf, feels vulnerable everywhere she goes, and this disability takes over her life. It's all she can ever think about. And this shows itself in her lack of confidence. Shoko feels like everybody is judging and watching her. She feels like she's always the centre of attention, even though she never wants to be. Meanwhile, Shoyo, the male protagonist of the story, was always desperate to impress the people around him. He was always worrying about what others thought of him, and constantly seeking their validation. Warning: this video contains spoilers for A Silent Voice. If you've not yet read the manga or watched the movie, then please don't watch this video until you have. In an attempt to impress his classmates, Shoyo bullies Shoko, hoping to win a few cheap laughs. And despite him making her life miserable, she still tries to be his friend, even helping him when he gets bullied himself. Shoko ends up leaving the school because of this bullying, and Shoyo gets blamed for it. This leads to Shoyo getting bullied himself by the rest of the class. They cut him out, and even warn new people who join the school not to talk to him. This pushes Shoyo to one of the lowest points in his life, not just because he's experiencing how horrible it is to get bullied, but because the one thing he cared about, seeking approval from others, has now been ripped away from him. But this causes Shoyo to start thinking on a deeper level. He thinks about how awful he must have made life for Shoko when he bullied her. He understands how vulnerable she must have felt, and he starts questioning why he behaved the way he did. This creates a shift in the dynamic. He no longer cares about what people think of him. He no longer wants to be the centre of attention, quite the opposite in fact. He starts looking down at his feet, he avoids social interactions, and he even avoids making eye contact with people. Shoyo even metaphorically places a purple cross in front of everyone's face to further shut them out. Shoyo's life becomes miserable. He feels like he's trapped in a swamp of pain and sorrow. He feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, and he can never get back to living a happy and meaningful life. Shoyo starts trying to make up for the damage he caused in the past. He saves up to pay back the money he owes his mum, and he even starts learning sign language in hopes that one day he might be able to apologise to Shoko for how he treated her. But despite all of this, Shoyo never truly forgives himself, and he decides to take his own life once he's finished making up for his past mistakes, even marking the date on his calendar. But when Shoyo finally reunites with Shoko, he asks if they can be friends instead, and this triggers Shoyo to go on a journey of personal growth. It's too early in the story to assume Shoyo has romantic feelings for Shoko, but it was clear they had chemistry, and because of this, Shoyo was more in tune with his own emotions too. The events that occurred between him and Shoko opened his eyes. He let go of his ego, he started building real relationships and focusing on what was meaningful to him instead. Imagine if these two never met. Shoyo might have wasted his entire life acting like the class clown, desperately trying to seek approval from the people around him. But because of Shoko opening his eyes, Shoyo began developing as a person. When Yuzuru ran away from home, he welcomed her into his house and allowed her to stay for dinner. He even forgave her for sharing the picture of him jumping into the river, and he persists with her, even when she refuses his help. He sticks up for Tomohiro when he gets bullied outside the school. And he goes on a series of summer dates with Shoko while awkwardly encouraging her to have fun. And despite how awkward these dates were, the two of them bonded further each time. These radical changes that took place led to Shoyo's life being more meaningful. And none of them would have happened if not for the emotional connection the two of them shared. A Silent Voice was not primarily intended to be a romance story. It's a story that discusses the complexities surrounding suicide and anxiety, and accepting our individual flaws. There are loads of videos on YouTube that go into this story in more detail, but I just wanted to focus on the emotional chemistry between Shoko and Shoyo, because I believe there's a valuable moral lesson to learn from that alone. When Shoyo was surrounded by fake friends in his classroom, he was trying so hard to impress them. He needed to constantly fill up his own ego to win their approval. But with Shoko, he built a relationship with someone who genuinely cared about him, and she supported him on his journey of self-growth, especially at the end, when she helps him confront and deal with his anxiety. And for me, that was one of the best moral lessons from this story. When we stop worrying about our ego and start focusing on what's important to us, we build more meaningful relationships. We often think of ourselves as being rational people, but we nearly always make emotional decisions. And by being more in tune with what's meaningful to us, our life becomes more fulfilling and purposeful. And while this may not have specifically been a romance story, I like to believe that Shoko and Shoyo did end up together at the end. Because in the manga, they're holding hands on the final page. But I don't know, that might just be me being a fanboy. I hope you enjoyed this video. The next romance arc I'm going to be talking about is Your Name. If you want to see it the moment it comes out, then please subscribe and turn on notifications. I'm going to try and release it next Wednesday, so hopefully I'll see you then.